Okay, we are at the beginning of Daf Chav Daled Amud Aleph, page 24a. If you're following the art scroll, 24a1. Ba'amine. So let's just review for 1 second. We had a machloket just now between in the Braita about whether or not yesh avelut b'Shabbat or en avelut b'Shabbat. Is there avelut on morning on Shabbat or not? We had two opinions in the Braita. The opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, and we had the opinion as well. What's it called? We had the Rabban Yochanan, and Rabban Gamliel, Tanakama, and Rabban Gamliel. Excuse me. Okay. So now the Gemara is going to ask on a halachic level. This question was raised amongst the Amoraim, and this is how it panned out. Rabbi Yochanan asked the question from Shemuel. Yesh avelut b'Shabbat or en avelut b'Shabbat? What's the halakha? Is there or isn't there? Amale, Shmuel said, en avelut b'Shabbat. There's no avelut on Shabbat. Yat ve'Rabanan kamed Rav Papa v'kamim mishmed Shmuel. So this conversation, the rabbis were sitting in front of Rav Papa and saying over that en avelut b'Shabbat, the name of Shmuel. Avel sheshimesh mitato b'imei evlo hayav mitat. If you have an avel that he has marital relations with his wife during Yemei Evlo while he is a mourner, Chayav Mitah, he has a punishment of death. Now, by the way, this Chayav Mitah is not a death in the Beit Din, rather it's a Mitah Bidei Shamayim. Why is it Mitah Bidei Shamayim? Because it's considered to be a big transgression to be having marital relations during the Avelut process. Avalu Rav Papa said, Asur Itmar. You're saying over in the name of Shemuel that it was a punishable by death prohibition. Asur Itmar. He said it was Asur. But Umishmeh Rabbi Yochanan Itmar. It was said that it was Asur to have relations, but it did not say that it was Asur to the point of Chayav Mitah. And not only that, if you're saying it's Asur, it wasn't Shemuel. It was Shemuel's adversary. Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan were having this discussion. Shmuel said, en avelut b'Shabbat. Rabbi Yochanan said, ostensibly, he's the other opinion here, yesh avelut b'Shabbat. So what did you mean to say that avel sheshimesh, avel that had relations is chayav mitah? You meant on Shabbat of the avelut. So on the Sabbath of the avelut, the man had relations with his wife while he was at avel. Chayav mitah, that's Rabbi Yochanan. And Rabbi Yochanan never said that there's Chayav Mitah. He just said Asur. Okay? Now before we move on, at this point, Rav Papa is correcting their phrase. So you think that you heard that not only is it Asur, but it gets this punishment Midei Shamayim. It's not true. You don't get that punishment. It's Asur, but not punished in that way. And that's not in the name of Shemuel. It's the name of Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan holds that there's avelut on Shabbat. Shmuel holds that there's no avelut on Shabbat. He would hold that the person is allowed to have marital relations on the Shabbat. So far, so good?
So why are they using marital relations as the bar representing avelut or no avelut, when there's a lot of situations where it would be other things symbolic of not doing avelut?
We'll get there in a second. But for right now, Tashmish Amitah is one of the things. My gut reaction to this question is that we had this idea. The idea was that on Shabbat, even the opinion that says that there is avelut says that there's no avelut befarhesia in public. So Yani, if the guy comes to shul on Shabbat, does he come with his ripped shirt? No. Why? Because we say that there's no public avelut. But you could still hold that there's private avelut, correct?
Yeah.
What's the most private thing that you could have? Intimacy. So we took the most private thing and we said, according to the opinion that says that it's Asur on Shabbat, even something which is so private that nobody else saw. So it can't be because of Shabbat, okay? So my gut reaction is that that's why we chose it. But we'll see in a minute what the Gemara is going to do with this.
It's an extreme thing, right?
Yeah. Mishmei de Shmuel. So if you're insistent that what you heard was not from Rabbi Yochanan, rather it was from Shmuel, who says, En avelut b'Shabbat, hachi shmi'alu, then this is what you heard, and this is what you mixed up. Amar Rav Tachlifa bar Avimi amar Shmuel. Rav Tachlifa said, son of Avimi in the name of Shmuel, Avel shelo para v'shelo feram, an Avel who did not let the hair grow long, or did not tear the clothing, chayav mita. In Shamayim, they're already telling him, they're already cutting his life short. Shneemar, Rashechem, the Pasuk says, and this is very left field, when the sons of Aaron, after the death of Nadav and Avihu, Elazar and Itamar, when Hashem saw that they were going to be really sitting Shiva, but they were going to be sitting Shiva on the day of the inauguration of the temple, okay, and that first week. So God said to them, Rashechem al tifrau, don't cut your hair. Ubigdechem lo tifromu, and don't tear your clothes. Velo tamutu, and you're not going to die for not doing so. Why? Because it's a holiday for Hashem. What does that tell you? God said to them, don't cut your hair, don't tear your clothes, because it's a holiday for Hashem. And if you do, right, don't worry, you're not going to die. Telling you that what would normally be the case for someone who did not tear their clothing and who did not practice avelut. Someone else who did not do the basic elements of avelut, chayav mita, is in the death penalty of mita bidei shamayim. Amar Rafram bar Papa, Rafra. So basically, you heard something in the name of Shmuel about not fulfilling avelut and not getting the death penalty. This is what you heard. But it was not about Shabbat, and it was not about Tashmish Amita, about intimacy. The Gemara continues, Amar Rafram bar Papa, Rafram bar Papa said, Tana, the Braita teaches us, Be'evel Rabati, in Evel Rabati, which is like a compendium of ideas surrounding Avelut. Avel, Asur l'shamesh mitato b'yimei evlo. An Avel is forbidden from having marital relations, we know, during Yimei Evlo. U'maaseh be'echad, there was a story with some person, sheshimesh mitato b'yimei evlo, that he actually engaged in the marital relations during that time. V'shamtu chazirim et geviyato. Machloket, what this means. Either pigs stole the body, they grabbed the body of the person before he died, and they ran off with it and they weren't able to bury him. Or geviyato could mean his actual manhood, that they removed his manhood after he died. You're obviously talking about wild boars, not about the regular, bacon in a farm. But they took it and as a sign of illustrating the payback for this disrespect that he'd had for his own mourner. But regardless, the Gemara is mentioning the Braita to illustrate this exact concept. Now, what are we talking about over here? If this Braita is meant to be relevant to our discussion, the marital relations that he had, when were they? Were they on Shabbat or not?
No, during the days of mourning.
So, yes, during the days of mourning, but in the Shabbat of mourning or not? Didn't say. So the Rashash actually learns that we're talking about Avelut on Shabbat. Why? Because the first statement that was made is that if a person has relations on Shabbat during the week of mourning, that's when we said he has this punishment of Mita Bidei Shamayim. But in either scenario, this is not Mita Bidei Shamayim. Guy was already dead. So there are other opinions, ostensibly, that would not agree with the Rashash. And what we're talking about over here is a general concept that we're talking about punishment that happens to someone because they did not fulfill the mitzvah of mourning. Now, let's be clear.
Can I ask you a question?
Hold on. Let's just be clear 1 second. So then what's the segue to Rafram bar Papa? If we started by a punishment for relations on Shabbat during the week of mourning, the answer is, it's a segue not from what we thought the statement of Shmuel was. Remember, the Gemara says, and if you heard it from Shemuel, Rav Papa said, what did you hear from Shemuel? The second teaching that I have from Shemuel, which is accurate, which is that if a person doesn't tear his clothing or rip his, or cut his hair, then he gets chayav mitah. Remember that? So you see that Shemuel taught, and when was he talking about this? Not on Shabbat, because on Shabbat we don't cut your hair and we don't tear the clothing. So the others that disagree about Rashash, with this Rashash would assume that this teaching of Rafram Bar Papa from Echarabti is actually not going in on Shabbat, is going during the week of mourning. Mara's question.
The guy who ate his whatever, he was the guy who engaged in marital relations and then he died and the boar then attacked him?
Correct. But it was seen as a clear sign.
Chayav mitah, the guy died already.
Oh, so again, so I said it's not mitah b'dei shamayim. But we see that there's not only, I think this is the point. The machloket in the beginning was, if you remember, they came and said that it's asur, and then you get this punishment, right? Says Rav Papa, no, asur, but there's no punishment of mitah b'dei shamayim. Right?
Right.
So here we're seeing not only that it's asur, but that there was a punishment administered to him for that action in this world, bidei shamayim.
Right, but was it on Shabbat? Because there's the machloket before you mentioned, was it on Shabbat, or the question, was it on Shabbat or not on Shabbat?
So I'm saying, you could learn it either way. According to the Rashash, it was on Shabbat. What would be the connection to midah b'dei shamayim? It was that this punishment was administered b'dei shamayim. I would argue and I would say that we've already come across this idea that when a person is humiliated in public, it's as if that person, you humiliate someone in public, it's as if you killed him. So the idea that he was humiliated in such a way that his body was not buried properly, or that it's such a humiliating experience that his manhood was bitten off, before they got a chance to bury him, it was a form of mitah b'dei shamayim. Where do we learn this idea? We learn this idea that the Gemara tells us that the process of burial is the honor of the deceased. So the honor of the deceased, you see, extends even past when he's no longer alive. And if we know that a humiliation is like a death penalty, so a humiliation of the person in the burial proceedings could be considered a form of mitah b'dei shamayim. Okay?
Could you explain the mitah b'shamayim a little bit more?
Generally, mitah b'dei shamayim means that the person dies a death administered by heaven, not by a court of law. So, as an example, there's a storm, and the guy dies in a storm. Random. It's like brought to him from shamayim. Okay? That's what a standard mitah b'dei shamayim. It's not karet, where the guy dies young. But if the guy dies before his time, in a way that it is administered by shamayim. Okay?
Wouldn't we say, you would say that was the way it was meant to be? I mean, you wouldn't blame it on something. You would say the guy just died. You never know. You never know.
This is not a matter of whether or not we would know. The matter here is that the punishment happens to him before his time from shamayim. Now you're right. You'll only find out after that. If a person passed away at 75, then he was going to make it to 77. You'd only find that out later. But that's always the case. How do you know a guy who has karet is going to die young before 50 because of karet? Maybe that, he was always going to die then.
Right.
The answer is, you're right. You would never know. You only find out after that actually you had a much bigger life that was meant for you. But you lost it. Okay? Let's continue. Says the Gemara. Amar Shemuel. Shemuel says, Pechaz chova, nitar reshut. So many times we have this idea throughout the rabbinic teachings. In fact, we even say it on the night of the Seder. On the night of the Seder we say, Rabbi Yehuda haya noten bahem simanim. What is the simanim of Rabbi Yehuda? Detzach, Adash, Be'achav, What does the tzach hadash ve'achav stand for? Dam sefardea, kinim, arov, deve, shchin, barad, arbe, choshech, makat, bechorot. Right? That's what it stands for. So those are the 10 plagues. So he gave us letters that will help us remember which plagues were the 10 plagues and as well what the order was. Shmuel is doing the same thing over here. What is pechaz natar? The Gemara is going to explain. Pechaz is chovah, obligated on Shabbat. Nitar is optional. What does it mean? What's pechaz? Pechaz stands for pay, piriat harosh, uncovering the head.
Have an amazing day. You too.
You got to go on mute. Levi, you got to go on mute, Levi. Okay? Pechaz means pei piriat harosh, which means uncovering the head. Now remember, the mourners, we said at the time, used to have a head wrapping. If you remember, we talked about having the head wrapping that came very low. We talked about it by the Mitzorah. Remember? So they had a head wrapping. The head wrapping of the mourner would have to come off on Shabbat. Chazarat kira le'achorav. Let's say the guy had a tear in his clothing. We don't want everyone to see the tear of the clothing, so he turns the garment, the beged that has the tear, he has it, puts it in the back, either the other way around, or he reverses it in the front, so you can't see that this clothing is torn, okay? So that's number 2. And number 3 is kifat hamita, which is they would take the bed and they would stand it upright. So they couldn't use the bed on Shabbat. So all of these things were outward expressions, visible expressions of mourning. On Shabbat, where a person does not have those visible expressions of mourning, like Shemuel said, en avelut b'Shabbat, you have an obligation to wind back those things. Now the Gemara says, what's nitar? Nitar nun, nilata sandal, wearing leather shoes. So on Shabbat, even if the guy was wearing his rubber Crocs throughout the week, what does he do? He switches on Shabbat to his leather shoes. Tashmish hamita, intimacy in the bedroom, says Shemuel, is not chovah, but allowed. You don't have to do that, but you could. So the guy, let's say he wants to wear his Crocs on Shabbat. He's allowed to. But if he wants to wear his head wrapping, or if he wants to come to shul with his tear intact, he's not allowed to do so because of kavod Shabbat. And finally, rechitzat yadayim v'raglayim b'chamin arbit. In the evening, when it comes time to Shabbat, if the guy has water that was already heated before Shabbat, he can't heat the water on Shabbat, then he's allowed to wash his face, his hands, yadayim and raglayim, his hands and his feet, with water, with warm water that was warmed up before Shabbat. That's all optional. He doesn't have to do that, but it's optional. Rav says, Rav disagrees with Shemuel, and he says it's not a pachaz netar, it's chaz netrap, because he adds the pay to the optional, which is piriyat harosh. Rav says that that's also optional. You don't have to undo the wrapping of the head on Shabbat. Gemara says, Shemuel that said that those things are obligations and some things are optional. Sandal. Why is wearing the shoes that you said reshut, it's optional? Delav kuli alma avidi desaimi misanayo. The reason why you said you're not obligated to wear leather shoes is because lav kuli alma avidi desaimi misanayo. Not everyone used to wear their shoes on Shabbat. So since not every person was wearing shoes in their house on Shabbat, just for comfort reasons, so therefore, it wouldn't be so obvious that the person was not wearing leather shoes because lots of people don't wear shoes. Okay? So therefore, the reason, Shemuel, why you said Nilata Sandal is because lots of people happen to just not wear shoes. So therefore, not wearing shoes for Avelut is not a sign that everyone sees of Avelut on Shabbat, because maybe the reason why I'm not doing it is for comfort. I like walking around without shoes. Therefore, says the Gemara, Periyat Rosh Nami, Lav Kuli Ame Avidim Megalu. Not everyone uncovers their head on Shabbat. Some people have their head wrapped on Shabbat, and therefore, it wouldn't conspicuously indicate that the guy is keeping his mourning, because maybe he's keeping his head wrapped on Shabbat with a turban, because some people wear a turban on Shabbat. Gemara says, no, Shemuel l'tameh. Shemuel is going according to his own reasoning. What's Shemuel's own reasoning? Dama Shemuel. Shemuel says in another place, Kol kera she'eno b'shat chimum eno kera. When a person has a tearing in the clothing, which is not b'shat chimum, not a time of extreme emotional distress, eno kera, that's not considered ripping of clothing. Why? Because it has to be that the tearing happens from the sadness, from the trauma, from the grief. Okay, and the chol atifa she'ena ka'atifat Ishmaelim, any atifa, any wrapping of the person's head, which is not like the atifa of the Ishmaelim, of the Arabs, ena atifa, it's not considered like wrapping of the head. So, what's a wrapping of the Ishmaelim? By the way, where do we learn from this opinion, from this concept? Where do we learn from this idea? Every morning when you put on your talit, what do? Lehit atef. That's atifa. To enwrap betalit, besisit. What do you do with your tzitzit then? You put it on your head, you take one, you throw it over your shoulder. You take the other, throw it over your shoulder. What do you look like now? You have the head wrapping of the Ishmaelim, of the Arabs in the desert. Now, that's why we do it that way. Since the beracha is to be atuf, batzitzit, so the only way to be atuf is to wrap it in the manner of the Ishmaelim. So listen what Shemuel says again. Any atifa, which is not the atifa of the Ishmaelim, is not atifa. So let's say I put the talit on my head like this. I don't throw it over my shoulder like that. I just put the talit on like I wear it with over my head and on both sides. But I don't throw it like that around my neck. That's not atifa. Says the Gemara, what is this atifat Ishmaelim? Machvi Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, it's in a case where the person is wrapped all the way ad gubi de dikna, until the place where the beard starts. Where is that? By the hollow part of the person's cheeks. Okay? In that place, that would be considered mourning. Now we go back to Shemuel. Shemuel says, right? Ask the Gemara, how come Shemuel says that you have to undo the head wrapping? There's a lot of people who wear a hat on Shabbat, a turban on Shabbat, a head covering on Shabbat. Then says the Gemara, Shmuel says, not what I was talking about. The only type of wrapping, which would be a wrapping for Avel, is a wrapping like that of the Arabs. And no one does that for no reason on Shabbat. By the way, the only person I remember that looked a lot like this was Baba Sali. Baba Sali was always wearing the thing over the head, the cloak, and as well the little scarf item that made it, what?
Question, isn't it unusual that they're going to emulate a Yishmael tradition, like we don't usually do that ever.
So the point here is not, the point here is not to say that we're doing it like them. The point here is to say, when we mention in wrapping the head for a halachic concept, what kind of wrapping are we describing? Answers the Gemara, that kind of wrapping. Now remember, the wrapping of the Ishmaelim is not a religious practice. It's a practical practice born of the fact that they were people of the desert. Okay?
Yes, or Arafat.
Yeah. So what are we describing? We're describing this kind of wrapping. So since that's what the wrapping of mourning is, says Shemuel, that wasn't something that was commonplace on Shabbat. So you have to undo that on Shabbat because it's clear and conspicuous that you're doing it for the sake of mourning. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Yaakov says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shanu, this idea that you have to uncover on Shabbat the head of Shmuel that Shmuel says it's an obligation and Rav said it's reshut, lo shanu ela she'en lo min alim beraglav, when he does not have shoes on his feet. Ava yesh lo min alim beraglav, min alav mochichin alav. Fascinating idea. Says Rabbi Yaakov in the name of Yochanan. Let's say a guy has the head wrapping on his head. We had a question if you're allowed to do it on Shabbat. Shmuel says obligation, undo it. Rav says optional, but Shmuel says obligation. How about if I'm not wearing shoes? Sorry, how about if I'm wearing leather shoes? Says the Gemara, no problem on the wrapping of the head. Why? Since if I look at your shoes, I know that you're not exhibiting mourning. So when I look at your head wrapping, I say, oh, the guy doesn't want to catch a cold. So he's wrapping his head all the way around his neck, so he's not catching a cold that way. But he's not doing this for the sake of Avelut. Why? Because look at his shoes.
So you only need one.
So one of the signs that I'm not doing Avelut is enough to indicate that the other signs, so long as there's something which is not exclusively for Avelut, it undoes that showing of Avelut on Shabbat. The Gemara now continues. Let's continue.
Rabbi, what about the cutting, like 30 days you don't shave?
Yeah.
Shabbat, you change your clothes, you do other things to respect Shabbat, but the shaving stays.
Shaving stays. The shaving, many of those things will stay on Shabbat. And the reason is because, first of all, it wasn't something that was common that had to be done on Shabbat. So it wasn't like a uniform thing that everyone's nails were cut on Shabbat.
So people had beards.
And beards. They had beards anyway, exactly. Right. Number one. Number two also, then Shabbat would be basically undoing the Avelut for Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Whereas the shirt you could
you go back. Exactly. Right. And in some level, that would be making like Shabbat undo the Avelut as opposed to just pausing it.
Right.
Okay. Says the Gemara. Kol kera. Let's go back to what Shemuel just taught us. Kol kera she'eno b'shat chimum eno kera. If somebody tears something, but not b'shat chimum, when they're extremely grief-stricken in the Avelut, eno kera. That's not considered as if he tore it. V'ha'amru le'le Shemuel. They said to Shemuel, nach nafshe de Rav. They told him that Rav passed away. Kara ale tres sarmane. He tore, in honor of Rav, 12 different garments. That's how important Rav was to him and how much of a show he wanted to illustrate of his mourning. Amar, he said, Azal Gavra dehave mistafina mine. A person that I was afraid of has left us. Amru le Rabbi Yochanan. They said to Rabbi Yochanan, nach nafshe de Rabbi Chanina. They told Rabbi Yochanan separately that Rabbi Chanina had passed away. Kara ale tlesa itztali melata. He tore over the death of Rabbi Chanina 13 robes or clothing, de melta, of silk, which was very expensive and a sign of tremendous wealth at the time. Amar, he said, Azel Gavra, to have a mistafina mine. I lost a person that I had a fear of him. Now, why was that important to these people? The reason is because the fear that they experienced for the Talmidei Chachamim was something that kept them in line. I heard this once from somebody. Someone said, Rabbi, I love how close we are. I was a student of Chacham Baruch, he said. I wish I was more afraid of you. That's what he said. Mm-hmm. So I smiled and I said, I hear you. First of all, it's hard for you to be afraid of me if I'm younger than you, right? So that comes also with a little bit of seniority. I said, but more importantly, all of your children are very close with me as their rabbi. If I was someone that you were afraid of, then the cost of me being more scary to you would be that I wouldn't have a relationship with them. And he said, Rabbi, you're exactly correct. I thought it was a very interesting conversation and noticing of perhaps generationally what the generation needs. Now, but you see that Rabbi Chanina and Shmuel were tearing their clothing over the loss of a tzaddik that they had like Yirat Shamayim from. And ostensibly, the idea that they were afraid of them meant that they were someone that would keep them in line, either by direct rebuke or just by the fact that the person was alive in their life. The Gemara says, so what do you see? He was tearing his clothing, true, in mourning, but not with like an intense sense of grief, right? Why? Because if he tore one clothing, that was the time he found out about it. The other 11 that he tore at a later point, correct? He wore that the next day. Well, the next day was not the time of extreme grief. It was less than. The next day was less than. So according to Shemuel, that the only tearing of Avelut, which counts as a tearing of Avelut, is the Avelut that comes in the moment of extreme grief, the highest, the pinnacle. The other ones were not that. So why did Shemuel tear 12 clothing if the 11 of them weren't counted as kiriyah of what's it called? Of mourning? Gemara answers, Shani Rabbanan, it's different by the rabbis. Dekevan nikol shata midachre shma'atayu, since every minute the teachings, the things that we heard from them are mentioned, are said over, mitkar, are like from the swap the dalet and the zayin, right? Like I said, dahab is like zahav, right? So midachre means like mizachre, like you remember. Since we're always remembering what they taught us, kishat chimum dami, it's always the moment of extreme grief continues on.
So the intensity stays for the 12 days.
Correct. For all the days that he tore, it was as intense. Because since he was mentioned every second and his teachings were mentioned, so as his teachings are mentioned, the rabbi himself is missed. And it experienced this intense grief, managed to carry on for a longer period of time. And that's why, both in the case of Shemuel and in the case of Rabbi Yochanan, it was an experience of the height of grief, Bishat Chimum. Yes?
Could it be extreme reverence instead of fear?
Whenever we're talking about fear, that's what we're talking about reverence. Yes. It's not a fear of being smitten, of being struck down by lightning.
Yeah.
Even the fear of God is not that I'm afraid of him. It's not supposed to be that anyway. It's an extreme reverence and awe. But that has a tinge of fear to it. Right? It's not that you're going to get hit. It's intimidation, but more than that even. The best way I've seen it described is that, that high level of fear actually comes from love. It's like a fear of letting down your father, of disappointing your wife, of having this relationship where this person has given me so much and I'm not respecting that. And maybe that lack of respect might cause me to lose it. But again, not that, and then I'll be alone. It's not about me. It's about damaging and having a flaw in the love itself. I'm afraid of breaking something that is so beautiful. Okay? Says the Gemara. Amale Ravin bar Ada le Rava. Ravin bar Ada said to Rava, Amar talmidach Rav Amram, Rava, your student, Rav Amram, said over, Tanya, the Braita tells us, Avel kol shiv'a kor'o lefanav, Avel, on the 7 days of Shiva, kor'o, the tear in his beged, lefanav, is in front of him, okay? When did we say that it's not in front of him? Shabbat. He turns the clothing around, or he turns the tear around, so you can't see that it's torn. Vimba lahachlif, machlif, vikorea. Let's say he wants to change his shirt from one to another. It can't be freshly laundered, but let's say he changes it to another shirt that's already worn. Then he has to tear it again. Bishabbat, kor'o la'achorav. On Shabbat, where's the tear? In the back. He turns the shirt around, or he turns it over. Okay? Vimba lahachlif. Let's say he wants to change his clothing. Machlif, he could change his clothing on Shabbat. Eno korea. He does not tear his clothing.
Rabbi, can he wear a shirt that's not torn on Shabbat? Why does it have to be torn? I mean,
That's what he just said. That's what he just said. If he wants to wear another shirt, machlif, he switches it, ve'eno korea, and he does not tear it.
oh, right. So it's an untorn shirt on Shabbat. Okay.
Correct.
Yes.
It still should not be fresh, ideally.
Not fresh.
Okay? Says the Gemara, but what do you see from the Braita? What do you see from this idea we just expressed? That if he changes his shirt during the 7 days, what does he do to this new shirt that he's wearing, even if it's unworn? He tears again. Okay? So what do you see from here? That he's tearing not in the height of grief. It's day 3, day 4, day 6, whatever. And he's tearing. And you told me that any tear that doesn't happen in intense grief is not considered a tear. The Gemara says, Ki tanyahi, when was that taught? Bichvod avivi imo, with his mother or father. And since it's talking about mother or father, as we learned earlier, there's an obligation to tear throughout the week of Shiva on his mother or father, right? Even if he has another clothing. Remember that we talked about if he gets the clothing later and we differentiate if it's a mother or father or if everybody else. So we're saying over here, so since we're talking about a mourning of mother or father, there the halacha is a consistent chiyuv of ripping all throughout the Shiva. But for somebody else, Shemuel says tearing, not in the moment of exceeding grief, is not considered a kera, a tearing of the halacha. Says the Gemara, Otan kirain, when a person rips, mitachin or en mitachin, are they allowed to sew up the rips or not? Pligiba avu adirav Oshia, the father of Rav Oshia had a machloket with Bar Kapra. One of them said, Chad Amar en mitachin, you're not allowed to sew it up. This is talking about the tears that he made in a beged that he switched to for his parents. So, day 1, he's wearing the beged that he tore. Day 6, day 5, he decides, you know something, I want to wear something else. Since he's sitting for his mother or father, what does he have to do? Rip again. But this is not the OG rip. This is the second rip he's making. That question was, on the second rip he's making, is he allowed to sew it up again after the shiva is over? Fixing the beged. Says the Gemara, Chad Amar en mitachin. One says no, and one says yes. Says the Gemara, who said what? Tistayim, let's figure out that Avua de Rav Oshia, that the father of Oshia is the one that said, en mitachin, that you don't fix it. The Amar Rav Oshia taught, en mitachin, that you don't fix the beged. Miman shmiale, who did Rav Oshia hear about it from? Probably from his father. Lav me Avua, from his father. So probably Avua de Rav Oshia is the one that holds en mitachin, and Bar Kapara is the one that holds mitachin, and you fix it up. The Gemara says, no, it's not a proof. Why? Because Rav Oshia, who did he study from? Who is his rabbi? Bar Kapara. So since his rabbi was Bar Kapara might have taught it to him. So here's Rav Oshia, whose father taught en mitachin, whose father taught one way, and Bar Kapara taught another way. He tells you en mitachin that you don't sew it up, must be from his dad. Answers the Gemara, no. The other person he could have learned it from was from his rabbi. And who was his rabbi? Bar Kapara.
How could he have learned it from Bar Kapara? Bar Kapara had a different opinion.
No, that's the whole point. We don't know what Bar Kapara said. And we don't know what the father of Oshia said. We know that they argued and one said yes, one said no. Gemara said, but we know what the son said. Rav Oshia. Rav Oshia said no. Says the Gemara, must be that his dad said no, because why would he have said no? He must have learned from his father, and his father said no. Answers the Gemara, no. Maybe his father said yes, but he's telling you over what he learned from his rabbi, and his rabbi was Bar Kapara. So really, maybe his father said yes, and the no that he's telling us is not coming from his dad, it's coming from his Rebbe. Okay?
The sewn up thing is that it's ripped shirt. He could sew it up.
Wait.
Is that what we're talking
Not ripped shirt, second ripped shirt.
Okay, but you could sew it up and use it?
Machloket, Rav Oshia Avur de Rabbi Oshia and Bar Kapara. Okay? Two opinions. On the second shirt of his father, of her father and mother. So the first shirt he tears in the beginning of the Shiva. That one we're not arguing about. Can't sew it up. Second shirt, now 3 days in, 4 days in, 5 days in, he wants to wear another shirt. Only for a parent, we said he tears it again. So on the torn, again, second shirt by parents, is he allowed to sew it up again? Machloket, father of Rav Oshia and Bar Kapara. Rav Oshia tells us, what does he say? En mitachin. We don't sew it up. Now, I have to tell you, the first thought that I had on this is, so what should the halacha be? There's a machloket. If you tear it, if you sew it up or not, how would you answer? What would the halacha? Who would it follow?
The last guy?
Sorry?
The not sewing.
We always say when there's a machloket,
Lenient.
Oh, lenient.
the lenient. What's the lenient?
Sewing.
And so it.
That you could sew it. So that should be the halacha, right? But actually, if you look down, you'll see the chet. Chad amar en mitachin. The little chet tells you, go up. Who do we follow? The little chet. Rambam Hilchot, Perek Hey in Avelut, and as well in the Shulchan Aruch, Shin Pevav, that what do? En mitachin, we don't say. How come? We have a machloket, we always go lenient.
But it's respect for the mother and father. Maybe that's more important than the interpretation.
But again, remember, we have a machloket, and we always go lenient.
Yeah. Yes.
What's the answer? Huh?
Where do you find that chet?
In the words of Bar Kapara,
No, I see the small chet, but you said it's referred to somewhere else?
look at the top left corner. You see Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Chet. Whenever you see that little letter, you know that's a cheat. That's a cheat to be able to know where the halacha is, which side it's going like.
So what did it say there?
That it's going like Chad Amar en mitachin. That you don't sew. How come we're not following the lenient opinion? Can anyone figure this out?
Are you in Rashi now?
No.
Where I don't see that.
Top left.
What are you looking for, Joe?
Miniature chet.
Okay, in the Gemara, about halfway down the wide lines, exactly half, you'll see a little chet by the word Chad Amar en mitachin. One says that you don't sew it up.
Yeah, but the other chet that it refers to is the top left.
And it goes to the top left. You see
I can't read that.
it's very small letters maybe, but you see Kuf Samach Aleph?
Yeah, what does it say?
There's a Hey Vav next to it.
Yeah.
Kuf Samach Bet, there's a Zayin next to it.
Yeah, I see the chet.
Kuf Samach Gimel, there's a Chet next to it. That says Mai, which means Maimoni, which is Rambam, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon.
Yeah.
Sham, which means in the aforementioned set of halachot, which refers to the laws of Avelut. Sham, Perek, Tet, in the 9th chapter, Halacha Aleph. Then Tur Shulchan Aruch, right? In the Shulchan Aruch and the Tur, Yoreh De'ah, Siman Shin Mem, chapter 340.
So it's referring to a reference book.
It's a reference to the halacha. And which one did it choose? En mitachin. So how come we're not going like the lenient in a machloket? Answer is because there was a machloket between father of Oshia and Bar Kapara. One says yes, one says no. We don't know which. But then the next generation down ruled en mitachin, that you're not allowed to sew up. There's a law that says lezel batar batra. We always go after the last person because he saw all the arguments and he ruled like one of them. Since we have an explicit ruling, like one side of the machloket, in the next generation down, the son and the student, we're going to follow en mitachin, even though there's a machloket and there's an opinion of leniency. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.
So they figured it out. The young guys figured it out.